So today's guest is none other than, we call him the Great Waterman, Maxwell Colonna. Alright, show some love for him.
Everyone's clapping at home.
Yeah, everyone's clapping.
How are you? Are you well?
Yeah, we're pretty good. It's the weather's pretty chilly today. It's not hot. It's been rainy. It's a rainy Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of the day here, but it's sunny. Yeah.
We call it the coffee kind of weather. You can drink tons of filter coffee.
Cheers. Yeah.
Yes. Cheers, guys.
I'm drinking. We launched at the beginning of the week. We launched a rare anaerobic lot from Achiari's, a Central America lot in Costa Rica. So we sold out in a day. But I'm.
Wow.
Yeah, well, there wasn't a lot of it. It sounds more impressive than it is. Yeah, but so we do one every quarter, and so this is what I'm drinking. Yeah.
So you managed to steal a stash.
Always.
For yourself.
Yeah. Always.
That's the perks of being the boss, right?
Right. Yeah. You just walk in. Yeah.
And just be like, okay, I'm gonna have 100 grams of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, only 100 grams.
Okay, so we'll be asking some questions about water, about your recent project, the Peak Water, of course. But for everyone that's watching with us, we would like you to be involved in our conversation. Please feel free to post the questions in the comment box below. Also, if you guys like Coffee On, please share this session with anybody that you think might be interested. And we'll be answering your questions with us later. Also, please feel free to show some love for Maxwell Colonna Dashwood whenever you like it. Yeah, so it's an incredible honor to have coffee and conversation with you, even if virtually. So you are also our first European guest on Coffee On.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm privileged.
I'm a little bit excited, as you can tell. We are all very excited. Yeah. Okay, so let me see. Let me just wave everyone. Say hello.
Wow, there's a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people. Okay, so Colonna's the man who raised awareness on the importance of water in coffee industry. So the first question, of course, everyone is dying to know, in your opinion, why water is so important in making a good cup.
Yeah, well, I still think it's crazy that me and Chris were able to have such a big impact on the way people thought about water. Because obviously water's been around forever. So, I'd actually noticed lots of other people in coffee talking about water, but more sort of saying that they were worried about it. So it seemed to have a big impact, but nobody really knew exactly how. Basically the whole project started because a coffee in our cafe in Bath, which has been there in the southwest of England for 11 years now. We used to be a multi-roaster, so we buy coffee from all over the world, and every week we would change the coffees and play around. And some of them taste good, some of them taste less good, and this was a coffee that should have tasted really good, and it didn't. And it was from a famous roaster, and so we tried everything. We tried the grind, we tried different weights, different flow rates, different extractions, and just couldn't get it to taste good. So we sent them the coffee back, and they came back to us and said, oh, it tastes great where we are. And it was confusing. And I think a lot of people in coffee just assume it's a difference of opinion. And we all talk online and we talk around the world about, oh, we're drinking the same coffee. And we're using the same grinder and the same recipe. And roasters share recipes all the time. But the one thing that isn't the same is the water, right?
That's right, yeah.
And so the main thing we started with was, well, everybody seems to use a TDS meter and talk about the ppm in the water, which is just a number for hardness. So the idea is a harder water has more minerals in it, they move around more, so you get a higher number. So you can buy one of these really, it's very, very cheap, like $25, $30 American dollars. And you put it in the water and it gives a reading like 100 or 300, or if you're in Denmark, like 600, which is really, really, really hard water. Yeah. And my main question was, okay, well, if it says 100 in where I am and it says 100 where someone else is that the same water? Then Chris, who was studying at Bath University at the time, who's a chemist, was in the shop, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, or no. So it could be chlorine or it could be calcium. So that was the beginning of the project, was just starting to ask a few more questions about this number. And what was great about the coffee industry is everyone sent us samples of their water, their coffee, and we went up to the university, and that just began to become more and more of a project. And we got a paper published in 2014. Maybe it was published 2013, end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And really, that was what I did the World Barista Championship routine around, which was showing that calcium and magnesium are interesting. But that routine was amazing because I actually did it because I was worried the judges were going to tell me that it was too complicated, which is why I put the lab coat on and tried to make it.
You were kind of expecting me to put the lab coat on today as well, actually.
I've still
just
got
a little bit sad to see you in a black t-shirt.
I've still got it at home. Every now and then I just put it on and just walk around. Yeah. But basically I was trying to make it as easy to understand for the judges, because a competition is not a good place to give a lecture about water, right? But actually what it meant is we've tried to figure out really simple ways to communicate water, because water's so complicated. And I think that's why people weren't talking about it, because they knew it was interesting, but it was too complex. So our whole project was, how can we A, learn about water, but B, communicate? And so we turned it into two main concepts, which is the minerals, which we call ions, so like calcium and magnesium, they help flavour. But if that's the case, why does really hard water taste bad? Because you should have more minerals and more flavour. So that's where the bicarbonate comes in, which flattens the acidity of the coffee. So really it was just getting people to understand that if they know the overall amount of minerals and they know the bicarbonate, they can know how acidic or clean or full-bodied their coffee will taste. The whole idea was, I often get frustrated in coffee that a lot of the science doesn't relate to flavour. So can we relate it to flavour? And that was 2014. Then we wrote the book, Water for Coffee, in 2015. And that was mainly because Sorry?
It's a challenging book to read.
Yeah, well, there's a joke about that book. When I go around the world, and I used to go around the world before the pandemic, people would say, I've read the book. And I was like, really? You've read all of the book? So basically the book it sold all around the world, and the conversation just improved. And actually we're working on an edition 2 because we've learned even more about water. But whilst we were learning and people were talking about it, one thing quickly with water for me, people wanted us to tell people what the right water was. They wanted us to say, the best water is X. But the research does not suggest there's a best water. First of all, espresso is so much stronger than filter coffee that you can, if you think about it, a hard water for espresso is a lot less water. So a filter coffee is a lot more water to less coffee, which is why people like softer waters for filter coffee and harder waters for espresso. But also, I firmly believe that not only is all coffee roasted to different waters, but also just different coffees taste better with different waters. So like very floral coffees, like geisha or something like that, will taste very good with a soft water, whereas a fruity, full-bodied Colombian coffee tastes good with a slightly harder water. So our whole point was to help people understand. Yeah, it was to help people understand water, so they could understand coffee better. Then it's up to them what they do with it. And then you have technology. So that's how Peak Water came about, because I basically noticed that people at home didn't have very good water.
So the concept of Peak Water came in when you were doing more research, while you're doing version 2 of the book?
No, Peak Water. So me and Chris ended up working with, do you know Pentair or Everpure? They're a very big water company around the world. And we worked with them to make the ultimate cafe system. So it would go under the bar in a cafe, and it would pull all the minerals out, and then you would have calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonate, and you, as the barista, could decide how much goes into the water, right? So a very complicated system, very expensive, very big, and it didn't ever make it to market. It was used at the World Barista Championships. Yeah, but whilst we were making that, we were basically, how good could we make a cafe system? What became very clear to me was that the systems already in cafes are pretty good.
Yeah.
And when customers will go in on a barista course, or they'll go into a bar and buy a bag of beans and ask the barista about how they should make it, I was just thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great to get people to be able to get the same quality of water as the cafe? And that's where Peak came, which was, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, we're more trying to take a technology that exists under cafes, bars, and get it into a format that people are used to make it more accessible, which is like a Brita jug. Yeah. So that was the whole idea. That was maybe 3 years ago, 2016, 17. Yeah. So and then we obviously, I was going to say, obviously it's easy to have an idea, it's harder to make it. Yeah.
So actually, before we received the Peak water, we were reading up about it, and then majority of the resources were saying that Peak water was actually very useful in countries with hard water.
Yeah.
But then Singapore actually has relatively soft water, so we were actually kind of worried that we were actually thinking, how will Peak water perform in Singapore? So when we actually did a blind test, when we did a blind test, we realized that there actually still a very significant difference between before and after using the Peak filter. So like in terms of flavor clarity, the quality of the acidity, there was actually a very distinctive difference that Peak water provided.
Yeah.
So could you share with us a little bit more, like what is the science behind it? Like even though Singapore's water is soft enough already, how come? How did the filter help in improving all these qualities?
Yeah.
No, sure. I think the problem with terms like soft, medium, and hard is what do they mean? So I think, even Singapore water has a certain amount of minerals in it which can potentially not be ideal for coffee brewing. So bicarbonate, for example, you don't really want much at all, especially for aromatic, clean, crisp coffees. So even though Singapore water is nowhere near as bad as Denmark, you still want to be able to bring that bicarbonate down a bit, but you also want to get rid of any organic compounds. You also want to reduce chlorine, and you also want to take out some of the anions. So what makes Peak a bit different is it can take everything out of the water. It can take the anions and the cations, which a lot of the commercial cartridges can't. One of the cool things about Peak was, because we weren't trying to create thousands of litres for a cafe, just 100 was the goal for people's homes, we could put more expensive resins in than you get in lots of commercial systems. But essentially for me, like, unless your water's completely empty, which it isn't really anywhere in the world, Peak is valuable. I think the reason people focused on the hard waters is because they're so bad. And Peak can deal with the hard waters where other filters can't. But actually, it will make coffee taste cleaner and sweeter with most waters. Yeah.
Understood. So can you also share with us, like, how do you manage to make Peak water so affordable? So like in terms of like commercial water filters, they're actually pretty pricey. So with like those Brita filters, those domestic water filter jugs, they're actually more on the pricier side. But then Peak water is actually still within the very affordable zone. So how do you all manage to make it so accessible for consumers?
Yeah, I think by giving people the raw technology, you can always reduce costs. So with obviously it's a jug format, which means there's a lot of cost for us up front to make something like that. So we have to make these big molds, but then it makes it affordable. And actually, in the production process, at the beginning when we were designing it, it was actually James Hoffman. Don't know if you know who he is. It's a joke. Yeah. we originally had everything in this jug. We had an electronic dial on the top that would tell you when to change the filter. We had sensors in it. It was made of, glass and wood, but it would have been, $300, for example. And it was actually James's idea to, why don't we make it analog and simple, and get the price down to make it accessible for people. So one of our goals at the beginning was, my main goal was it has to do the job. It has to make the coffee taste better. That has to be, there's no compromise there. And then the next goal was, how do we make it affordable and accessible? And we're still working on trying to improve that all the time. But yeah, I think different technologies allow you to bring the price down. Like, even in a hard water area, it's still more affordable than bottled water or adding your own minerals to deionized water, etc. Yeah, so for me, it's been great to see people who would never make their own water. They would never buy the minerals and buy the deionized water, use Peak and get excited about water. Yeah.
Cool. So when I first found out about the Kickstarter project, the first component that caught my attention was actually how we could dial in how we want the water to be filtered. But then the second component that had me fully sold was actually your recycling program. Yeah, I really like how sustainable and how supportive Peak Water is in supporting their buyers in this whole initiative. So could you share with our viewers a little bit more about your recycling program?
Yeah, I think you can't develop any product now and not try and think about how to make it as sustainable as possible. And different products are harder than others. And what I got excited about with Peak Water was the resin can basically be washed, recharged, and reused infinitely. Like, it can just, it's life thing. Whereas lots of other recycled products, they get worse over time, right? So you start with like raw paper to make a takeaway cup with, and then you recycle it, and the paper gets worse and worse and worse and worse and has less uses. So what's amazing about this is we can, over time, we will benefit as a company to get the resin back, because we buy it at the beginning, we charge it, ship it, get it back, wash it, clean it. So I think that's important. If the company isn't incentivized to recycle something, you'll never get big recycling numbers. And then the second side of it, like you said, is how easy or hard it is. So the truth about most recycling is it's down to customers. And if it's hard for customers to recycle, they won't, basically. So our goal was, how can we work with our partners around the world, like you, and how can we make it as easy as possible for people to recycle? So as we work with people around the world, one of our sort of demands is that to not only tell the story of Peak Water, but to create recycling initiatives. Yeah. But you can tell me how people are able to recycle them in Singapore.
So for our friends, for PPP, if you all are done with your filters, all you all need to do is to just pass us back the used filters, and then what we're going to do is that we will collate all the filters, and then Peak Water will actually send us the rebill, and then they will just easily ship it back to the UK. So that is actually super easy. You just need to make sure that your filter is dry, is clean, and then we'll just do the rest for everyone. So that was the part that I was very convinced, because recycling is often can be a bit tedious, which is what turns a lot of people away. But then this whole project on recycling is very supportive, and it's very fast free.
Yeah. So over time, we will just keep trying to improve it, see what works, see what doesn't work. Because as we develop the product, there's other things we could do as well to make recycling even easier. So we'll keep trying to improve that. Yeah.
So what I really like about this whole recycling project is also how, like, for example, if the demand for better water for coffee increases, we don't have to take in even more resources, because what we're going to do is just produce a little bit more of the filters. But moving forward, it's just about taking back, cleaning everything up, and then everyone can get to use it again. So it is very environmental friendly.
Yeah, precisely. And even the outer case is designed to clip together so that we can take it apart. We're actually one of the changes we're making right now is to reduce the components in the filter. So at the moment it has mesh at the top and mesh at the bottom. but we've actually figured out we can mold the holes into the bottom, so we don't need a mesh. So we're always thinking about how we can reduce the amount of plastic and the amount of mesh and stuff we're using. Yeah.
Sounds good. So share with us a little bit more about your journey of creating the pig water jar, which is right here. Like how was it? How was the journey like from like the day you had that concept and until now, whereby there's that product ready, and with all that initiative on recycling, how long did it take for you to piece everything together?
Yeah, I think I'm a very impatient person, so it felt like it took a long time. But when I speak to people who have built products, they say that we were very quick.
Oh.
Because it's taken us about three and a half years. So for those people who backed the Kickstarter, they know it was very late.
Things take time.
They do, yeah. And I think so at the beginning you have the idea and the concept, and then you create some basic prototypes, and then you start to find out what the problems are. A lot of the problems are small things. We got the main filtration to work at the beginning. Leon's agreeing it's hard. We got the main filtration idea to work. The challenge was the flow rates between the two chambers. So the holes all have to be right, so that as you open the dial, the water wasn't getting, the bypass chamber is smaller. So what was happening is the water wasn't going through there, and it was still over filtering. So we had to put a little siphon in that chamber and make the holes on the big chamber smaller, so that you could force more water through the bypass to give people the control. But the real challenge was getting it into production. So each part of peak water is injection molded, and so that means you have to get a big metal mold made, and then you fill it with molten plastic and create each part. But then the parts warp and the parts shrink, and you have to put lots of tiny tweaks in to get everything to fit together properly. So yeah, I think, and I also think, you never launch a hardware product that doesn't have ongoing development. So I think for us, with Peak, it's like we'll keep evolving it all the time. But the key for me was, as soon as it can make people's water taste great, to get it to people. And then, you start to have new ideas, and as people around the world have a Peak, we find out, we get different feedback, what people like, what people don't like. Little things are interesting, like, the pour flat and stuff. People would like that to be a little bit looser. It's interesting what people, when they're using something every day for months, what they focus on. So it's been, I wouldn't change it for the world. It's been a great project, but the first project is always the hardest, right? So I've learned a lot, and the people I work with have learned a lot. So I'm, as we do more products, I think, we'll benefit from all that learning. But what was amazing about the coffee industry is how supportive everyone has been of the project. So, people, on the whole, there's a few less supportive people. But on the whole, people are very supportive of the project and have come along on the journey with us. But yeah, 3 to 4 years to get a product to market is apparent. Yeah, it's pretty good. But I think that's what's interesting about having an idea and getting it into something real that you can have in your hands is very hard. Yeah.
I have a question. Are you in the cafe right now?
I am in the cafe, yeah.
That's why I hear like the grinding action.
Yeah, we open, so we still don't have all the seats open. We're doing takeaway at the front of the cafe. But yeah, but now I get the whole cafe to myself. So. which is what I always wanted. Anyway.
For yourself, right? You created a space for yourself.
You can walk in and make yourself a cup of coffee.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we have one last question on our side, and then we'll jump on the Q&A with the viewers that we have today. But before that, we'll just quickly mention about the giveaway once again. Yeah, so for this Coffee On episode 11, we'll be doing a giveaway for one lucky viewer. What would they be getting?
So they'll be getting a bag of coffee and also a limited edition PVP mug. Yeah, so all they need to do is to just screenshot this is the live session and then tag us at PPP Coffee and share with us what you have learned about water through this session. And then we'll pick one lucky viewer.
Yeah. I'll send this cup over to you soon as well, Maxwell.
You will? Oh,
Yeah. You're not left out.
Yeah, do you want me to tell you? I can tell you what I've learned about water if you want.
That's amazing.
Okay. So I think talking about peak water and also your routine at WBC. So did these two things happen concurrently together, or did it happen separately at different timelines?
Yeah, so the water project originally, the only goal was to. Most of what I do in coffee is never. It's not. I'd like to make something. Generally, I'm not looking to make a product, or I'm really just trying to answer a question. I got into coffee and was like, wow, there's so many interesting questions and so many unknowns. And really, I never had any clear plan of I want to do this in 3 years or 5 years. I just got involved in trying to explore some of the questions, collaborate. And to do that, I had to collaborate with other people who are experts in different fields. And really, the whole water project was just about learning and increasing awareness. And Peak Water just came organically out of being involved in water and seeing what the problems that customers had were. Because obviously you need to learn about something to know what the problems are, to then know what the solutions are, right? So when I did WBC, that was at the beginning of just trying to get people to think about water. And then it was about a year or two later that the idea for Peak Water came along. Yeah.
So with all that talks about like the people giving the feedbacks and all, where do you see Peak Water going to in the next few years? Or like we've been hearing about version 2 of Peak Water. Are we lucky enough to hear about your plans with it?
Yeah, I think Ron, just one of our viewers asking that as well.
Yeah, I think some of our viewers have some interest on like the future developments of Peak Water.
I think what's great about Peak Water is it's been successful already. Lots of people have supported it and they want it. So there's a lot more you could do, I think you could do a lot more to make water not only better at home, but I think the next step is to give people even more control. Mm-hmm. So I think we could definitely do a mineralization jug, because under the counter system where you play with adding minerals, the problem is the flow rate through the filter, right? So let's say you make 10 espresso or whatever, and then you're quiet, and then the water just sits in the filter. Mm-hmm. And that means that the mineralization is variable. Whereas what's cool about Peak Water is every time you put 1 liter in, it filters at a predefined rate. So it should be a more consistent format to mineralize water than other formats. So that was something that I always wanted to do, which was go, okay, first of all, let's control minerals that are in water and clean water. And then let's look at how we could play around with minerals. But then there's other things that I would like to do. I'd like to do a portable Peak Water.
Whoa.
As well.
That'd be very helpful when we travel.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think a lot of people like this for travel because if you're in coffee, you're all the way through the chain. So if you're going to a farm, that's interesting. If you're doing a tasting, but also just if you're a customer and you want to take your coffee with you, the water is even if you take an AeroPress and a hand grinder, the water is the missing spot. So I think for us, we want to grow the world of Peak Water, and it's more than just one product. But like I said before, it's products are hard. So I think for us, the more successful Peak is, the more we'll do with new development. But we definitely want to keep developing new water technologies. Yeah.
Awesome. We have a bunch of questions, but let's start with this one from Cafe Hopper. Do you work with coffee scientists to create Peak Water?
With water scientists.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, during the whole time that I was working on the book and with Pentair, etc. So one of the courses, Chris, who I wrote the book with, he's now a professor in America. So we talk about water science, but then I also partner with a DNA inventor. So he is a UK-based inventor, and he invented a DNA sequencing machine.
Wow.
So right now they're very popular because people use them for COVID, but he has been in biotech for many years, but he's always been passionate about two things that he says are actually very complicated that people don't realize, which is coffee and hairdressing.
Coffee what? Hairdressing?
Hairdressing, yeah.
Hairdressing, like hairdressing. How?
No, it's true. It's true because hair is complicated. Like it does funny things. So anyway, I'm more into coffee.
Are you sure?
but we're actually working on a grinder together separately. I think grinding is one of the next areas for innovation and change in coffee. But but I work with lots of people. Like something I've always done ever since I got into coffee was realize that you're never going to be an expert in everything. And what you need to do is figure out who to collaborate with, to learn from. And you need to learn enough about something to make the right decisions. But you also, if you can create a team, and that team can change over time and different people can become a part of it. And also just the coffee industry itself is better than ever before at innovation now, right? So I'm seeing more and more open source innovation. So innovation used to just happen in a big company, right? So you would have a big company that would hire some people to come up with new ideas. Now you're seeing, forums or online articles. And I just think there's actually a lot of innovation happening in the world of coffee conversation. I guess I don't collaborate with I don't have a scientist locked in a room.
In a cage, right? Where you just keep in coffee every day. Take off my coffee down it.
Yeah, precisely. So I think that answers that question. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Pretty a lot of questions. Let me see. Okay, we should do this first.
Okay, I think
This is a pretty good question. There are some people who doesn't believe in water's impact on coffee. How do we share? What's your way of sharing or making the information available, easy and accessible?
I mean, are they the same people who believe in a flat Earth? Because I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, I think what's interesting about it is I don't think anyone who's done a blind taste test will continue to believe that. I think it's that simple. And I think that out of all the things you can teach people in coffee, water's the most accessible. It's the easiest to teach them, right? But you have to get them to taste because so what I will often do is we'll go, okay, here I will get the same coffee, but I won't tell anyone it's the same coffee, and I'll make 3 waters, and I'll say, do you want to taste these 3 coffees? And they go along and they say, oh, I love this one. I don't really like this one. Where's that from? And I'm okay about this one. And then I tell them it's all the same coffee. So you kind of have to cheat people a little bit just to get them to...
That's very sneaky.
Yeah, well, I'm a sneaky person. I think having an argument with someone about a theory doesn't help anyone, right? You end up being just a debate. So what I always like about coffee in all of it is bringing it back to taste. If you look at the things I've done in coffee, I'm only interested in the places where you can actually taste the difference, right? So, of course, let's say we can debate the standard deviation of extraction and variation in shots. I will always step back and go, can you really taste the difference? Does a 10% variation even matter? So the reason I ended up doing water is it's just so obvious. It has such a big impact. So yeah, I would say you need to devise a plan to get them to taste something without them knowing it, and then tell them.
And then like secretly change their mind, right?
Yeah, you just have to get people to challenge themselves, yeah.
So when you first suggest that concept of the importance of water to the people around you, what was their first reaction?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I think it's amazing to see how far water has come. So when we started the project, it was something not many people talked about. And even now, you get people just say to me, "Oh no, we've got good water," and I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" You know. And I think basically people around me thought the challenge with coffee is it's very, very hard to consider all of the variables at once, right? Coffee's complicated. It's like, okay, well, how important is the grind? How important is the brew method? How important is the roast? And I think for a lot of us over our years in coffee, we're trying to learn how to taste the difference. So like my question to my team is always, when you taste it, like, can you separate what's the green coffee, what's the roast, what's the brew method? And it's really hard. It's not always easy. But I think when I brought it up with people around me, it made sense, right? Like, I actually think you say it to most people, they go, well, yeah, of course, it's 98% water. Like, of course it makes a difference. But I think everyone is surprised when they taste it, how big a difference it makes. So I think for all of us, when we started the journey, we didn't expect to get to a point where we could, identify how big a deal water was. Like, I think that surprised most people, including me. Like, the important thing about science in coffee is you never go into it with a predefined idea of the answer, right? Because I've seen this quite a lot. People say to me, "Oh, how do I do the science to prove this?" And I'm like, well, no, that's not how science works. You have a question and you don't know the answer yet till you do the science. You might have an idea, but it's always important to be open-minded that the answer might not be what you think it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll give you a couple of minutes to take a sip of your coffee while we...
I've finished it. I've finished the coffee.
Must be a delicious coffee then.
Yeah, it's very good, yeah.
Okay, so the next question by Copy Hustle 101. In your opinion, obviously we already know the answer for this, but which one is more important to mark the taste of coffee? The grinder of the water?
Oh wow, good question. Yeah, I think the water is more important than the grinder. But my tip with grinding is for years I struggled to find, speaking of the science of coffee, I struggled to find a correlation between a particle distribution curve. If everyone's familiar with those, it's basically you grind coffee up and then you measure the difference in sizes. And basically the grinders that tasted good, their particle distributions, they look very similar to other grinders, right? So this project was when we recognized that the heat generated when you grind at the point of the grinder is the biggest difference in flavor. So, and the problem is, the finer you grind, the more heat you create. So that's why now I know why everyone likes the cupping table, right? Because it's the coarsest grind. Whereas for years I was like, why does cupped coffee taste good? It's just coffee in a bowl. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it's because the grind's coarse. So I went back to the cafe and then we were brewing AeroPresses in like 1 minute. And obviously you have to grind medium fine to brew that full extraction. So we went coarser and did longer brews, and I blind tasted them, and I picked one side. I was like, these are all clean, sweet, fruity, bright, and they were all the coarser grind, right? And so the challenge is our grinder challenge is how can we make a grinder where you don't generate heat, but you can grind finer or coarser? Anyway, my point being is that I think the impact of grinding depends on the coffee. And it's the same with water, really. The more complex the coffee, the bigger the impact of both of those things. But this is why freezing coffee tastes good, right? Not because it changes the particle distribution, but because it stops the heat damage in the grinder. Just to give you an example, a lot of people don't measure the heat right at the burr when it's grinding. Some famous espresso grinders at the point of grinding espresso are hitting 160 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
Yeah, but you don't know it's that hot, right? So yeah, I would say that water has a bigger impact than grinding, but grinding has a bigger impact than brew method.
I think you got to repeat that one more time for the viewers.
Sorry, I would say that water is bigger than grinding, but grinding is bigger than brew method.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question, I think we also already know how you're gonna reply to this. So it's by this viewer called Jack Charlotte. Any recommendation to read about water and coffee? Surprise.
Well, the thing is, I get messages every week because we haven't been publishing the book for maybe a year and a half now. So the only place you can find one now is on Amazon or eBay, right? For lots of people resell them for like £300 because me and Chris plan to. Yeah, just sell it. Don't read it. Just sell it. Now, obviously, I think Water for Coffee is the best resource, but we didn't want to keep selling it until we changed it because we think that, for example, espresso versus filter are definitely different. And so right now, I would say, there's a few good books out there. Ronnie Billerman, who is from Pentair. He's written a water book, which is good. And Water for Coffee 2, I would hope to be out next year. Yeah, but
Nice.
Yeah.
Would you like to take the next question?
Okay, so this question is from Easy Faris. Could the further understanding of water's impact on coffee change the way coffee is processed at farm level, particularly wash processed coffee?
I mean, it's a good question. I think obviously water happens throughout the whole supply chain, all the way through from, obviously you need water to grow coffee. There is always moisture content in coffee, and one of the things we've been doing is one of our projects was to rehydrate green coffee after it landed, because the 10 to 12% that coffee gets shipped at is to keep it for shipping. It's not the best way to roast it or taste it. So, and I also think a lot of the flavor in coffee now that I was always used to struggle with, say, a bourbon variety grown in one country versus another country. Why does it taste so different? And I don't think it makes sense that it's just soil or sunshine. A lot of it is microbes. A lot of the taste is microbes. And but also roasting coffee is hard with low moisture. So if we were taking green coffee back to 60% moisture by steaming it and then roasting it, and every time the one that had been steamed and roasted with higher moisture had 2 points higher on the table blind.
Wow.
Yeah, but in terms of processing, I think at the farm level, processing lacks a lot of science. Like it's very experimental, but I'll often read somebody saying, "Oh, we put it through this process and the coffee tastes sweeter because this happened." And I think a lot of the time there's no science to back that up. It's like you had a process and you got a flavor, but exactly why, I don't think the science has been done there. So I think there's lots of science to be done at a processing level to really understand why. Water is part of that, of course it's part of it. I just think there's a lot of unknowns, but yeah, I think whether it's water or microbes or fermentation, I think there's a lot of research to be done to really understand how to get certain results from processing. Yeah.
Something new to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. So everyone's curious, especially this user cafe hop. What inspired the design for peak water?
Yep. I didn't want it to look like other water jugs, first of all. I think most of the other water jugs look like they were designed in the 80s and then they never changed.
Yeah, that's true.
I think one of the interesting questions is, so there's a guy called Elliot J. Stocks who is a designer who we work with, and we like the idea of making it opaque, of making it not see-through. But I think, I don't know what you think or what the people on the channel think. I think some people like the fact that it's not see-through, and some people would like it see-through. What do you think?
I actually find it quite sexy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You make people curious, like, what is this? And then you make a very good conversation starter.
Yeah, I think because it does something different in water, it was important that it looks different. It was the same as what we did with our cafe, right? So we opened the cafe in the UK and it looked like a normal cafe, but we were selling unusual coffees and we were trying to not do what a normal cafe does. So then we redesigned the cafe to look unusual. So people are like, oh, what do you do exactly? And that is a better way to start the conversation about how it's different. And I think the same with Peak. And I think as well as technology, so much of a great product is about a strong brand. So we wanted to have a strong identity. But I think for Christmas and Black Friday, we'll do laser etched versions.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. But I also think we will launch a see-through version.
Okay. Cool.
As well.
Cool.
So then people can choose.
We've actually got quite a lot of questions, but on Instagram, there's only an hour time limit, so we'll try our best to answer most of your questions. So, shall we do this one? Okay, so what are some learnings that surprised you about water while you were developing Peak?
What surprised me about water?
Everything.
Yeah.
Like, does it change the way you drink like water now?
Yeah, I think the one thing that happened was during Peak, the filter, when we launched Kickstarter, the filter clipped on underneath. And then I looked at all the other water jugs and they sit in the filter from the top and they have like a little moat so that they stay wet. And actually that's the resins basically have a 60% moisture content and they need to stay wet to work the best, which is why we've added that. So they now stay wet. But also I think water's just very complicated, and even though we tested Peak in multiple areas, then when we went out to the world, like there are just so many different waters out there, and they'll do some interesting things. So, there were surprises all along the way. So, the anion, so like silicon, if you have silica in the water, that will really use up the anion resin very quickly. I don't think you have that, but there's other countries that do. So I think it's very complicated, and like the amount of carbon is different country to country based on how much chlorine there is. One of the amazing things that I found out about water was we worked with the university, obviously, on the coffee project, and then we went up to meet other water projects, and even cleaned water that's been through processing stations and then is in the taps, there's still traces of drugs in all of the water. So what this study did is it used the water to show where different drugs were taken more around the world. So they were like, oh, London, you can tell using London water that lots of people do cocaine. and then in Berlin, there was lots of heroin. Yeah, but I think what's interesting is like even clean water, even water that has like low TDS, it's still, there's still lots of traces of different things in water. Like it's amazing. And I think
Singapore's water to you.
Yeah, we should probably ask you to investigate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think we keep learning a lot all the time about water. And during peak, it was more just how challenging water is to work with. It's a very challenging thing to work. I think treating water is harder than treating coffee. Yeah.
All right, we are a bit short on time. It's a very long question. I can't see. Okay, just go. Cannot.
Oh no! Okay, water is 98% water. Okay, coffee is 98% and earth are 70%. Is there any future plans personally? Or it's a bit hard to read this, or for peak water to be involved in. Perhaps Sarah, you would like to post your question under the comment section so that we can see your full question. Yeah.
Maybe we can answer this one next.
Yeah. Any partnership plans with other companies? Maybe like attaching peak water with an espresso machine. Whoa.
I mean, that's a cool idea. I mean,
we're getting
I think there's lots of potential for Peak to do collaborations, right? With bean to cup machines or with any machine, really. I think what's interesting is when I had the idea for Peak, I wasn't going to do it myself. I was going to try and find a partner to help, right? But I went to the water companies and they all said no. So I said, okay, I'll make it myself. And I think a lot of what I've done in coffee is proved that there is interest in something that people are not sure there's interest in. And then what happens is, now people are interested in collaborating with Peak. So yeah, I think since we've launched it and shown that people, love the idea, there'll be more collaborations. So for sure, we'd love to. I'm a collaborator at heart. Like I like to do collaborations. So hopefully, but nothing in the short term. I think in the short term, we just want to, get Peak out there. Yeah.
Earn a bit of profit in the meantime, right?
Sorry.
Earn a bit of profit in the meantime.
Well, you can't keep going if you're not making any money.
Okay, last question.
Would you like to finish?
Right. I think this one is about the name of your project. Miss Me 70, I think. Sorry if I pronounced it wrongly. She wants to find out why do you call this Peak? Why the name Peak?
Yeah, the inspiration behind the name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to get names for things, right? I think I liked Peak because, obviously it says a few things, which I think it suggests that you're trying to achieve the peak of something, like to achieve the best of something. And then obviously water, even when I asked people what they thought with the word, people would think of mountains and they would think of, and obviously a lot of water originates on snow-capped mountains. But I was actually worried because Malkonig have a grinder called Peak, so they'd already used the word, but I was like, I think it's better for a water filter than a grinder. So I used it, and they seemed happy. I think it just we tried loads. I'm outside now. I have a gym appointment.
Oh, I see that. So we just like to say thank you for joining us today on this very special episode on Coffee On.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Really our honor to be able to talk to you today. Thank you for sharing so much as well.
Yeah, you're clearly like fangirling right now.
I'm clearly what? Sorry.
Fangirling.
Oh, is that what's happening?
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you everyone for watching as well.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you for all your
Cool,
questions.
Send
All
me
right,
that
all
mug,
good.
yeah?
We'll leave you alone right now. We'll leave you alone.
Okay.
You gotta send me
I'm
the
gonna
cup.
send you a mug. I'm gonna send you a mug. You saw samples of Singapore's water as well.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.